Welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm Charlie Imbergamo, Director of Strategic Programs for the Nonprofit Leadership Center. We have a few of our NLC teammates and board members registered for this session, and so on behalf of all of us, we welcome you and we're delighted to have you with us as we continue our mission to develop and connect nonprofit leaders in this virtual space. As we continue to emerge from the challenges of the pandemic, those on our lives, the effect on our communities, and the implications on our work, it feels important to name that this free webinar has the largest registration of any of the ones that we have done in the past, and that the topic of mental fitness continues to be something we hear a lot about, we continue to bear up to, we show up for, both for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our work, and for the good of our communities. And so welcome to 5 tools to build your mental fitness. To recognize you and the organizations and the communities you represent, please take a moment to locate the chat and to type the name of your organization and the location from which you are participating in the chat right now. And as we see the names and the organizations pop into the feed, allow us to celebrate you and the great work that you're doing in our communities. We are joined today by Kristen Lessig-Schennerlein, who is an internationally certified leadership and positive intelligence coach, as well as a Yoga Alliance registered yoga instructor with additional training in energy medicine. As a nonprofit founder herself and executive director with nearly 2 decades of building, growing, and turning around nonprofits, Kristen continues to be the change she wishes to see in our world. Her current passion is guiding powerful, mission-driven leaders and teams through the inner work of linking their power and their passions. Moderating our session today is my teammate, Karina Kletter, NLC's program associate. Karina has been an awesome driving force in our virtual work, in all of our work, and in providing an accessible virtual experience for all of our participants. She's passionate about the work that we do and our commitment to respond to the needs of our community with quality resources. Karina will take us through some rules of the road for our time together. Karina.
Thank you so much, Charlie. So I'll just take you all through a few rules of the road for our time together today. To minimize background noise and distractions, all lines will be muted for the duration of the webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available on our website within the next few days. You may have noticed that we have live captions enabled, which is a Zoom accessibility feature. If you find them distracting, or if you would like to see them but don't see them yet, you can enable or disable them by going to the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking on the icon that says CC Live Transcript. Once you click that, click the button that says Disable Auto Transcription or Enable Auto Transcription. We warmly welcome your questions. Please type them in the chat box as they come up for you, and we'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for Kristen to answer as much as we're able to get to. If you haven't found the chat box yet, go to the settings at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on chat. And if you haven't already, please share the name of your organization in the chat box. We're so delighted to have Kristen with us today and look forward to a great informative webinar. On to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you all. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Charlie. This has been a long time in the making, but as Charlie so eloquently said, we all need mental fitness right now, and we'll continue to need it. So let's go on this journey together. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here, guide for our presentation. So today we'll be talking about the 5 tools of mental fitness to build our leadership resilience. And so I think it's an important aspect to begin with is really congratulating you on taking this first step to build your resilience through mental fitness by jumping on this call. And there's a lot of competing priorities, so taking the time to be here, I want to celebrate each of you and the amazing organizations you represent that I saw coming through chat. So together we'll explore how mental fitness can build your resilience for yourself, for your organization, and just highlight some key challenges that we are experiencing in the nonprofit sector. It's about a 50-minute presentation. And we'll leave some time for question and answer at the end. But again, I want you to walk away with something. So you'll have some tools here to build your own mental fitness as you leave this session today, and an opportunity to kind of go beyond this insight into real action. So let's get started. So took me a little digging up, but here's a picture of me a long time ago when I founded a nonprofit organization. I was a college student. I was an adult college student, and I was really passionate about this population of people with physical disabilities. And so I had a program development assignment, and I thought, well, what the heck? If there's a real need here in the community, why don't I go ahead and actually make this happen? Well, little did I know, right? Our culture is such that it's like type A personality, high achieving. Why not do this? And so I had no idea the journey that I was headed on. But in all of my career as the executive director of that organization and in other organizations after that, a lot of my team would say one thing that I was resilient. And I attribute that to a lot of the work that I did, my own mental fitness, maybe some of my yoga training, but also just really seeing every challenge that I may be facing in my roles as an opportunity to learn and grow. So what is resilience? So Karina is going to launch a little poll here about the key attributes of leadership resilience, what you all believe. I want to kind of learn from you right now. What do you believe the most important attribute of resilient leadership is? So take a moment here. It's always exciting to see the different answers coming in. Yeah, so it's amazing too, the shift. I asked this question a couple of months ago in another presentation and different results. So far, it looks like self-awareness is highest for this group. So pretty amazing. We can end that poll and share those results. Looks like most everybody has, 47% of all of you on this call. So that's great. Good place to start with the work that we're doing today. Thank you. So what is resilience? I think it's important here just to think about how we define it. So the ability to recover and adapt to change and move forward in the face of adversity. This is definitely framed as a leadership skill set, but also a means to measure our organizational capacity. And why does that matter right now? So what Charlie mentioned, I don't know, Karina, can you close that poll? Let's see.
You can X out of your own view of it.
Got it. All right. Okay. So why does it matter? Well, because the reality of today, this is a recent study by Horton International, reported that as many as 49% of leaders are struggling with some type of mental health condition as a result of sustained stress. So on top of that, in the past couple of years, we've also seen an increase by 25% in just anxiety and depression overall. So resilience in our organizations begins with ourselves, begins with our ability to create a culture where there's trust and accountability, this psychological safe environment. Be adaptive, navigate change, right? But in nonprofits, what we are often very proud of is our core values. And so one of the core values of a resilient team really is to take care of ourselves, our own mental health, if we're in the business of taking care of others. And I encourage you to kind of think about that, because as we move through this presentation, you are a role model for those around you, whether it's a peer, the people you serve, but regardless of your leadership role or title, it's important for you to show what it means to focus on your own mental fitness, mental health as a resilient leader, so that others feel comfortable in doing that as well. And another interesting share that I have in an article by Judith Rodin, a former president of the Rockefeller Foundation. She wrote about the need to look ahead, finding new ways to innovate and improve the nonprofit sector. And this is something that I really felt was strong in the way in which we go about our work. So shifting the pace of our work more long-term, right? This idea that the pace of change is so fast in our current world that we can't possibly do everything that we set out to do and solve all of the problems that we need to solve through the important nonprofit work that we do. So in the face of that, how do we build this resilient organizational capacity? And a key way, I think, is this inspiring vision and roadmap that we all have. You know, we have the mission, the vision statements, but within this roadmap, one thing that we often forget about is having the space to create a place for us to handle the inevitable challenges that we may face. So we don't want our teams to burn out. We do not want to burn out. We know that challenges will come our way. So thinking of this in a means of building this into our plans, our strategic plans, and those roadmaps for the future. And knowing that we have the power within us as each individual member of this team, this organization, to build on our mental fitness, build on our confidence, so that we can do and continue to do for the long term the amazing work that we're doing. There's also this element of kind of scarcity of resources, of time, right? And this kind of crisis mode that we often feel like we're in service to really important and vulnerable populations a lot of the time. And so we still need to kind of see that as an opportunity to shift from abundance to opportunity, kind of more of a positive mindset. So we can grow and learn and deepen our work and maybe do even more creative and innovative work for these important populations. So I want to take a moment and share a little bit of what resilience to me looks like in action, hoping that the video should play pretty well, but you get the general gist. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds long. So this is my view of resilience in action.
I've come to realize the greatest discoveries aren't out here. They're inside you. One of the shortfalls I think many people have is that they allow all these distractions and fears and doubts to get into their head and sabotage them. Is there a way to make that difficult thing a catalyst to moving on to something different rather than just allowing it to crush you? I'm one of 118 people in history to have reached the top of all 7 summits. But I'm the only person to do it blind. I may not be able to see, but I can still show others what's possible.
So to me, Eric embodies one of the attributes of leadership resilience that was on that list earlier, being optimistic. So when obstacles come up for someone that is optimistic, the question that we often ask ourselves is, how can I overcome this versus why did this happen to me? And so their energy is focused, right, on more of the positive. How can I learn and grow from this? And it gives them the space to be resilient and to push forward whatever comes their way. So I'm going to launch that second poll, Karina, right now, and just check in about the greatest challenge that you all are facing right now in your organizations. So the biggest challenges facing your organization right now. Yes, this is consistent with what we have been seeing for sure. So far, looks like a clear winner here is talent retention and growth opportunities. So our staffing in nonprofits, one of the most important of the sectors hit, I think, through the pandemic, shifts in the staffing. So we can go ahead and most everybody has answered here. So share the results. So talent retention growth opportunities, over close to half of folks on this call today. So just giving us some perspective on how we are all in this together and facing some of the similar challenges. I'm going to go ahead and transition here to our next slide. So another inspirational leader, aside from Eric, Shirzad Shamin. So he is the author of the New York Times bestselling book, and all the content in the upcoming slides are based on his work in positive intelligence. And it's all research-based and informed by more than 750,000 research participants, and applying some of the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience and psychology. So as part of the positive intelligence team and a PQ coach, I would say, is we are helping every human build mental fitness so they can fulfill their true potential for happiness and contribution. So that is the mission and vision of positive intelligence. So what is mental fitness? And what we'll learn about today is, just as you all said at the beginning, one of the greatest leadership attributes of resilient leadership is self-awareness. So it's perfect because that's what we call inner work. So building our capacity as leaders to focus on our own mental fitness helps us to bring that learning and growth and create a culture of that within our organizations, and look beyond just the idea of physical activity and physical fitness as a means for workplace well-being, but really to think about how we can support the needs of building mental fitness through just 3 core mental muscles so that we can thrive in these continued challenging times or whatever else may lay ahead. So let's start with the definition. So what is the definition of mental fitness? It's our capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive versus a negative mindset. So key areas of impact that I'm sure we can all benefit from, right, are higher level peak performance, a general more peace of mind and wellness, and healthier relationships, both professionally and personally. So I would also add what mental fitness is and what it is not. So mental fitness is a consistent well-being regimen, and it is a means to build your resilience. It is necessary for all of us to participate and practice every day, regardless of mental health. So mental fitness is not just self-care for performance, and it is not a quick and easy fix for burnout. This is not something that is also reserved just for people with more mental health challenges and issues that may be going on. This is for all of us. So what we do know is I've run a few marathons in my life. And so one thing that I think about is, if we're physically fit, we can run a marathon, we can climb steep hills without physical stress. But there's also an element of thinking about how your mental fitness plays into that. We can handle life's challenges without a lot of stress and negative emotions. We'll be happier and perform better. And by happier, I mean that more often we experience positive emotions of joy, happiness, wonder, positive emotions like that versus stress, overwhelm. So we cannot afford to kind of drain our energy with negative thoughts or emotions. We want to be able to experience and perform at a higher level because of those positive emotions. So the research foundation that is a big part of positive intelligence is positive psychology, performance science, neuroscience, cognitive behavior psychology. And those are the kind of the four cornerstones of positive intelligence. And the research that has been done has included hundreds of CEOs, Stanford students, world-class athletes, and 750,000 participants from 50 different countries. And the research is summarized in Shirzad's book, Positive Intelligence, which is translated into 20 languages. So let's begin with this power of factor analysis. So this discovers the root cause. It results in radical simplification. So a great example of this would be that the root of 1,000 colors are only 3 factors: red, blue, and yellow. 3 simple colors. So if I'm an artist, I don't need a palette of 1,000 colors to create a beautiful, masterful piece of work. And the same is true when we look at the factor analysis research for positive intelligence, for mental fitness. We only need 3 core muscles, and those are at the root of our mental fitness. And they're listed here. So we're going to talk about these: saboteur interceptor, our sage, and our self-command muscle. So it turns out that in addition to the 3 muscles, what we will also make note of is that we also have 10 saboteurs, and we have access to 5 sage powers. These 5 sage powers are going to be those tools, those takeaways for you as this part of this workshop, this webinar. And it's interesting to think about the interplay that happens in all of us every day, probably dozens of times a day, maybe hundreds of times a day, where it's like an internal tug of war between these sage powers and our negative saboteurs. So let's start with those negative saboteurs and the judge. So the judge being the ringleader of all of our negative thoughts. We'll launch a last poll here, Karina, just for you to note maybe the experience that you've had in the past 24 hours. What have been some of the emotions that have run through you in the past 24 hours? Yeah, so it's always pretty humbling to see this come in, because it's anonymous and we can all share, right? Stressed and afraid, we can end that poll. More than half stressed or afraid in the past 24 hours. And likely that repeats itself. Stop sharing that day in, day out. So where the judge comes in is that there's 3 ways in which we judge. We judge ourselves. It's that little inner critic voice in our head telling us, Kristen, you're not speaking loud enough. Kristen, whatever it is, as I'm presenting here to you now. Judging others in a meeting, can't believe she's saying that. Or judging circumstance. This is bad. The fact that this is happening to me is bad. And so that alone, if we just had the judge, our ability to kind of pull in the sage, this positive thinking, right, of like, we would be able to overcome some of those judge thoughts. The problem is, what's tricky is that the judge pulls in what we call accomplice saboteurs. So this is the cast of characters, our accomplice saboteurs. Controller, hyperachiever, I mentioned that one at the very beginning. Restless, stickler, pleaser tends to be very popular, and one that we'll talk about here. And when it comes to nonprofit work, hypervigilant, avoider, victim, hyperrational. So I'd take a little pause here and say that the one thing about positive intelligence that I really appreciate is we aren't labeling you as a hyperachiever, a controller, a pleaser. Like, our saboteurs evolve. They shift, they change over time, and somewhat circumstantial. We have the power, these sage powers, to shift them. What we also need to take into account is these are our strengths that we have taken too far. So they're coming from a good place, well-intentioned, but often we take them too far. So we utilize a saboteur assessment. And so at the end of this presentation, I'll drop in the chat a link so you can take that assessment. It's a free assessment. And this is what your results will look like. And this just shows you, like for James, what saboteurs are showing up for him most powerfully. It's different for everyone, but we all have all of them at different times. So James may be a high controller, but he also may have a tendency to, be a hyperachiever as well at some points in times. So the results are really robust in that it gives you the characteristics, the thoughts, the lies of these different saboteurs. So I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to take the assessment, because it's really interesting to get this feedback when it comes to that self-awareness aspect. So a little bit more about these saboteurs and our sage powers. So the saboteurs are motivated through negative emotions, and the sage powers are motivated through positive emotions. Think of the saboteurs like our fight or flight mechanism. It was our evolutionary survival strategy. We needed it. Doesn't necessarily serve us in the same way anymore to be motivated from fear, stress, anger, guilt, shame, insecurity. We want to be shifting and moving from a place of empathy, curiosity, creativity, passion, and purpose. Because what we do know is that the saboteurs may generate success, but perhaps not happiness. And the sage powers, if we're really tapped into our sage, we can generate the highest success and sustained happiness. So if I think back to myself when I founded that organization, if I had known about the sage powers then, and had known about this ability to kind of shift into more of that positive mindset, yes, I was successful in my career and have been, but there are definitely times in my life where I could have enjoyed the journey a little bit more. And so that's really what this is about. So a question that often comes up right now is, aren't negative emotions good for you? So think about this for a moment. And if I think back to that example, right, that hyperachiever in me, I was successful in founding a nonprofit. If I'm leading a meeting and I need to jump in and take things over because it's going off the rails, and my controller's helping me out, maybe more of a short game than a long game in that example. So now I'd ask you this question: is pain good for you? So think about that for a moment as you look at this image. Is pain good for you? So negative emotions are good for a second to alert us. They're a signal. Dr. Susan David, she's a psychologist. She does a lot of research around emotional agility. You may have read her book, and she talks about them being signposts. So I see the negative emotions as a signal, but if we stay in that negative emotion, we cannot see clearly, and we cannot tap into these sage powers. So what is the sage that I speak of? So the sage lives in this region of our brain that's associated with more peace, calm, clear-headed, laser focus, bigger picture, creative, positive emotions. And it operates from the sage perspective. So think about this in response to your judge's negative thoughts. if we could understand how to intercept the saboteurs with this sage, what would be possible? And so this sage perspective, every outcome or circumstance can be converted to a gift and opportunity. And I say that again, every outcome or circumstance can be converted to a gift or an opportunity. So the key is to unlock that. So maybe it's accepting, that's a little measure of resilience, just in knowing that right now, I don't have time to deal with this. This is a smaller issue. I have to kind of be okay with just letting it go. And then with a bigger issue, it's not just, resilience is about not just the speed in which we recover from a setback, as I mentioned earlier, but also our ability to thrive during the challenging times, not just kind of keep our head above water and survive. So we want to be able to convert things in those moments. And this idea of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and that military kind of mindset, that's judge-driven control. So one thing that I want to make important to say is we're not denying negative emotions or feelings. That is not part of this work. What we're saying is we need to use them. This no pain, no gain kind of mentality isn't the way to go. We need to use them to inform our decisions to convert and move forward. So an example here of the sage perspective, how a bad thing turned out to be a gift and opportunity. At the beginning of my career, I was a therapist on a spinal cord injury unit with young gentlemen who were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they would never walk again. Through that experience, I also met numerous Paralympic athletes, either who suffered a traumatic injury or that were born with a disability. And many of them would say that the fact that they were born with a disability or that they had that traumatic accident was actually the best thing that could have ever happened to them. Because as a result of that, they were able to do things that they would have never done, to play sports on the world stage, traveling as a Paralympic athlete, to help others living with a disability, like this little boy here. And so this is Paul Schulte. He's a wheelchair basketball player. And I just think about that because there was a choice in that moment when they were delivered that kind of that prognosis, that future of what their future could look like. So I want to take a little pause here and ask everybody to just jot down on a little piece of paper by you something that you believe to be a challenge right now in your personal or professional life. And so as we move through this presentation, we want to take this challenge that you jotted down, and we want that to be our guide, maybe with some of the tools that we're going to share, to think about how we can actively convert that. Because what we know to be true is that if our perspective is this is going to be bad, it's going to be bad. If the perspective is we're going to learn and grow from this, we're going to learn and grow from this. And we start by using the power of our self-command muscle. So taking a moment here, I want to just go ahead and have each of you. Now, if you're driving and listening in here, you can't necessarily do this, but we're gonna rather than explain, we're gonna experience what a PQ rep is. So if you are seated and you can close your eyes, just set it back in your chair. If you are driving and listening in, maybe just intently look at something in front of you, which hopefully you're doing anyways, and just notice the natural pattern of your breath in this moment. So our mind follows our breath, and oftentimes our breath is really shallow, our thoughts are really scattered. And so on your next inhale, I just invite you to breathe in a little bit deeper, filling up your belly, filling up your chest, feeling the lungs, rib cage expand, and on the exhale, feeling the chest collapse and your belly collapse. And maybe on your next inhale, you notice the sensation of air as you breathe in through your nose and the sensation of air as you breathe out through your mouth. And then continuing with this deep breath in, maybe noticing the temperature of air on your next breath in. and the temperature of air as you slowly exhale out. And feeling into our sense of touch. If it's available to you, maybe take your index finger and your thumb and just gently start to rub index finger and thumb together so you can feel the ridges of your fingertips, your thumb. And if you're driving, maybe feeling the wheel underneath your hands or wiggling your toes in your shoes, just feeling into your body for a moment. And you can release your hands down and return to a natural rhythm of your breath. In just a few seconds, maybe a minute, just notice the difference that you may feel and experience just with what we'd call a PQ rep. A little bit of connecting into our body, connecting and anchoring into our breath. And the more you do this, the easier it becomes. And that's the simplicity of the work that we're doing in positive intelligence to build your mental fitness. So if you're feeling the negative emotions, those saboteurs are coming in, you do those PQ reps, you quiet those voices, and you activate your sage, that calm, clear-headed, laser-focused, so that you can assume this sage perspective as you move forward with that challenge you jotted down on the piece of paper there. And we'll generate that by using one of our sage powers, one of these tools in our toolbox. And sometimes it's more about planting seeds, right? So we don't necessarily think we're going to have an answer today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe depending on the size of the challenge, and maybe a few weeks or months down the road. But by doing this work, we're starting to plant the seeds. So here are the 5 sage powers: empathy, exploration, innovation, navigate, and activate. There's a few power games that we play in positive intelligence associated with each, and we'll talk a little bit about what those look like. So first and foremost, I think it's important to start with the sage power of empathy. Because, as I mentioned earlier, as nonprofit leaders and those that work in the nonprofit sector, we care deeply about the mission, the people that we serve, the work that we're doing. Again, so deeply that sometimes we take this superpower, this strength of empathy, a little bit too far, and we put the needs of ourselves on the back burner. And so our target is not only others with empathy, but with ourselves first, filling up our cup, because that saboteur, the pleaser, that's our empathy gone a little bit too far. So the role of empathy in the work that we're doing is knowing that we are all imperfect. We all fall short of ideals all the time. All of us, doesn't matter. And when do we need to use empathy? Whenever strong emotions are involved. It's the first power that we go to, so that we can feel what it may be like to be in the other person's shoes in this situation, in this challenge. But we can also show ourselves some love and compassion, what it feels like to be us facing this challenge. And we can practice that self-care, self-compassion, self-empathy, because we know that we can't continue to do this amazing work that we do without powering up our emotional reserves. And so this could be as simple as practicing gratitude, at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, a little gratitude journal helps you shift your mindset, kind of a more positive way of thinking. But it's intentional. And it's intentional to kind of help refuel us for whatever comes our way the next day, versus that tendency of the judge to focus on what is negative in any given day. And just a couple of roadblocks. There's no time for fun. I think about that in nonprofit work, is we can often get so entrenched in what we're doing that we really deny ourselves any other outlet, any passions, any hobbies. Those are the things that energize us. They refuel us to do the great work that we're doing. We can't be fooled by the lies of those saboteurs telling us that we don't have time. And And in situations with other people, we also have to think about the fact that we may have empathy for another person doesn't mean we're condoning their action. It just allows us the opportunity to connect at a deeper level and have a conversation with them about the lessons learned so that together we can avoid those same mistakes in the future. Really important in the work that we're doing with the team. So here I share a couple pictures of my kiddos, my daughter to the left and my son to the right. And so with empathy, one of the things that we do in positive intelligence is visualize this childhood version of ourselves. And to me, it was really important to kind of highlight another aspect of some of the positive emotions associated with each of these children in each of these photos. My daughter to the left, that was right before we moved to Florida. She had no idea the changes that were about to come her way in her life, some good, some not so good. And she was just free and playing in the moment. My son to the right, a couple months ago on spring break, snuck out to the beach for a little while down here in Florida, and he could not be more happy to have the waves rushing over him. Where I was in both of those situations was likely thinking about the number of other things on my to-do list in between taking him to the beach, or all of the packing and things that needed to be done with my daughter right before we were moving down the East Coast. So in those moments, those were refueling moments to really be present with them, to kind of share in that joy of each of those moments. And that's something that I challenge each of you to think about in your lives. Where could you add a little bit more of that? And then the next tool, the next sage power here is exploration. So exploration to me is that deep curiosity and just discovery, getting excited about learning. The question that I often like to ask is, what are all the relevant factors that are contributing to this challenge? It's kind of like this power game of fascinated anthropologist. And the interesting thing about using exploration is that I think that oftentimes, rewinding to the beginning of the presentation, when I said that roadmap, that vision, that strategic plan needed to have space. So we don't create the space for some of this exploration to happen so that we can get curious when a challenge comes our way. We can explore, we can ask ourselves these questions. And we need to slow down, because what happens is we can tap into this curiosity, this ability to see things differently. Curiosity and being in this curious state of mind, it pulls us out of this judgment. So your mind cannot be in judge mode and curious at the same time. It's not possible. So really tapping into this deep curiosity about whatever challenge you jotted down on that little piece of paper, all of the relevant factors that may be contributing, that helps give us the details we need so that we can move forward with the plan. And then the sage power of innovate. So here, again, another place where we need some space is to truly innovate. Because I think what a lot of clients will tell me is, oh yeah, we do this yes and game all the time. You know, we have these innovation sessions and, you know, we're brainstorming. Because the desire to kind of collaborate, to come up with more ideas is something that we all, you know, think that we do really well, or maybe we like to practice. But the problem is, yes, and when we play that game, so what I like about your idea is we have to note the yes. We have to acknowledge that 10% that we like about the other person's idea before we just say, oh yes, and now this idea. Because that's what really fuels the innovation, that positive energy in that meeting that will lead to who knows what in the way of outcomes. And it's about generating a quantity of ideas of how we face the challenge versus quality. There's always time to go back and evaluate that long list of ideas later. We will do that. Let your rational mind know that will come. But for right now, this is about generating a quantity of ideas and fueling that innovation. And then the sage power navigate. So one of my favorites in working with clients And I think when working with nonprofits, it's really probably easy accessible because we're very driven by our mission and purpose. We want to lead this kind of meaningful life, do this meaningful work. And that's what the Navigate Power is all about. And the way that we tap into this is we ask ourselves, at the end of my life looking back, what would be most important for me to remember as I handle this challenge right now? Kind of consulting that elder, wiser version of yourself. We can sort out what truly matters. We can be guided by what we value, kind of that deeper meaning and purpose, that North Star. And then the sage power of activate. So this is the final one. This is our Jedi, as Shirzad would say, right? Where we move into this calm, clear-headed, laser-focused action, fierce and fearless. So as a leader, calm, cool, and collected, right? That's what we want to be for our teams and the work that we're doing. But we can't do that without this level of self-awareness, doing the inner work to build our mental fitness, right? To use these tools so that we can adapt and modify and intercept those saboteurs. And part of that is preempting, kind of knowing this is, where the most powerful saboteur I have is the pleaser. And so I imagine when I go to take this action that my pleaser is going to come in and tell me that that is selfish. Any type of self-care is selfish, right? So I anticipate that and I preempt that saboteur. And I have a sage response for that so that I can continue to move forward doing kind of that thing that I know that I need to do, coming from a more positive place in the face of a challenge. So the question here, is it really possible? So we're wrapping up here. And I mentioned this earlier. Yes, it is, but it depends on the depth and the strength of your mental fitness muscle. So I'm not going to go into the gym and throw up 250 pounds tomorrow, right? I'm going to start with that 20-pound dumbbell. So we need to build up our mental fitness strength. And we can't just think that coming to a webinar, this insight is going to be all that we need. We need to commit to this daily practice. And in positive intelligence, this looks like maybe 15 minutes a day. And so one of the programs that I run is an 8-week program, but I also, meet people where they are and kind of customize opportunities for mental fitness training for organizations based on size. And so as you're thinking about, oh, wait, how do I continue to do this? It's like, wait, I have already so much on my plate. I can't possibly add this, or, don't you know, everything's a priority. And of course, self-care, investment, boundaries in ourselves, that is selfish. And so what if this is precisely what you needed to give yourself a little more energy, to improve your capacity, right? To be able to navigate the challenges that you may be facing. This collective overwhelm and stress and anxiety that you all mentioned feeling, right? If we could shift that to do the good work that we need to do. So a couple opportunities I'll drop in the chat at the end. I'm happy to do kind of a mental fitness 101 with your team. I'm also happy to sit down with people and debrief their saboteur assessment if you choose to take that. And if you're interested in more about future trainings, you can kind of be added to the wait list there. But I'm always posting things on social media, then a leadership, positive intelligence, little posts that could benefit from. So feel free to share. And I just want to close with thinking about that energy that we're bringing to our environment. So in positive intelligence, we talk about being in the PQ channel, that sage, right? And energy is really important there. The facts, figures, details, that's our data channel. And so when I started this work, I was walking into a coaching session with my coach, and I was frazzled and overwhelmed and stressed. And that's when he recommended positive intelligence to me, because the way that I was showing up on the outside, if that was any indication of how I was feeling on the inside, it was a 911 call. And so he really wanted to give me the tools and help me to see that there was a different way to kind of take control of my life again. So I ask you now, what's the energy you wish to bring to your environments? And I'll give you a couple of options as you drop your answers in the chat. It may look something like this, may look something like this. And maybe it's a little bit of all of these in one day, that roller coaster that we may feel. Just take a moment, drop in the chat. What is the energy you wish to bring to your environments from this call? Grounded, can do, positive, calm, and peace. Peace and optimism. Yeah, curiosity, rested. It's amazing what a little sleep can do. I think of Curious George every time I think of curiosity. Encouragement, patience, balance, and grace. Yes, grace is important. We are all mixed bag of sage and saboteur. Thank you. Keep them coming in. I'm going to add one final question. So drop in the chat here before we go to question and answers. What's one key insight that you're taking away from our time together today? One key insight you are taking away from our time together today. Always helps me. And yeah. The need for self-care is so important, even more so now. And the saboteurs can be very damaging. Yes, self-care. Yep, always room for more practice. Time for me. So keep them coming in. I want to thank you all. Together, if we were a little more sage versus our saboteurs, we'd be changing the world. That's the goal here. And let's go ahead. If anyone has any questions for me, let's explore together.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions from Charlie in my private messages. So everybody, if you have questions for Kristen, go ahead and add them to the chat box, and I will grab them from the chat box and share them with her. So I will share the two questions that I got in my private messages. The first one is, can you share some strategies for communicating what I learn about myself to others around me?
Yes. So I think, you know, when you think about showing up authentically in our leadership, it is okay to be vulnerable. And so in particular, if you took the saboteur assessment and you saw that these are kind of higher ranking, you know, powerful saboteurs on your list, you know, there may be some key people on your team where if you've taken some time to go through that assessment and you've decided on maybe some action item strategies of how you want to really intercept them, you know, bringing your team along to say, this is something that I am working on, right? This is something I've learned about myself. And what I realize in that assessment results, it also talks about its impact on other people. And so you'll have some information about that. Like, so I imagine that this is impacting you all in this way. So it's really important to me to work on this. And together, right, you can ask for their support in doing that work and holding you accountable. I always think that's a great way to kind of share with others.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That's great, very helpful. The next question I have, and we're still taking questions, everybody, I haven't gotten any more yet. The next question I have is, how do we introduce self-care questions to our team and leadership if it doesn't already exist now?
Yes. And so depending on your position within the organization too, I know that this can be a challenge, right? If you are not in a leadership position to make that decision or to model that, how do you ask for that? Well, and I think that there's, you know, there's definitely a lot of research out there, but it starts almost by setting some boundaries, right? So simple things like creating some start and end times to your day, maybe actually taking advantage of some of those PTO days that you have right? And actually taking them off, because I know that that's generally a problem for nonprofits, right? Is like, we actually don't even take the time that we are given. So I think that that's the first place to start, is what do you have in the way of time off or, control over your schedule that you can begin with, because that in and of itself is self-care. And that starts to send a message to leadership, right? That there's, that you're doing some things to take care of yourself. And I think that will then open their eyes up to maybe looking at other ways. And of course, I'm happy to always come and do a presentation for an hour. So if you just want to say, hey, this person offers a free webinar, I'd come and share this and bring some of those insights to make the conversation easier.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kristen. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So Kristen, do you have any last comments that you would like to share with the group today?
No, I know that you all are sending the slide deck, and so I'm going to drop a few things in the chat before folks jump off. And so I just encourage everybody just to pick, one sage power that maybe sounded like something you could really wrap your head around. Maybe it's that self-care, that empathy, and just begin to focus your attention there on building that up in your day. Let me go ahead and send this. I'm going to drop a few links here in the chat. Let's see, another question. Is that a question?
Looks like Anne has just dropped a question into the chat box.
They would benefit. Can you provide additional resources, recommendations, and well, I definitely can. There's a lot of great work out there, a lot of great, kind of little video snippets or things that people can find online. And so, Anne, if you reach out to me, I'm happy to share some more details to you one-on-one. I don't have them prepared right now, but I can definitely do that. I'll drop my email in here next. And I welcome the chance to sit down with anybody that has registered or attended this session. So even if you're listening to the recording, I'm happy to take some time to kind of review your assessment results, if that's helpful to you.
Okay, and thank you for everyone who has not, who does not have their chat box open right now. Kristen has just shared several helpful links for you, as well as her email address to connect with her directly. So make sure you take a look at those. They will also be available when we post the recording in the next few days. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Kristen Lessig-Schennerlein for sharing this incredibly informative and thoughtful presentation. A thank you to everyone that joined us today. We'll be sharing the recording and the slide deck and those links in the next week or so. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, and keep your eyes out for upcoming webinars. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.